So I'm going to talk to you about Islam today, throw my hat into the ring trying to explain jihad. I know there's 1,000 videos out there for it, but I promise you mine's going to be different. Either some imams trying to paint it like jihad isn't part of Islam anymore, or they'll say jihad means lesser jihad with oneself, but every religion has that lesser jihad. You'll get some haters of Islam and some people that left it talking about the dark side of it. You'll get some people trying to teach it historically without getting into understanding it. And then lastly, you'll get some crazy imam extremists talking about cutting the heads off the kufr. So there's no good answers in these, so I'm going to be the only one that's going to give you a good answer. I had a dream 20 years ago. God was in it and told me he was going to give me wisdom in Islam to surpass others. I'm not saying that's true. I don't even know if it was God in the dream. I'm not claiming to be a spiritual reformer or anything like this, but it's a funny thing that after I had that dream and was curious and studied it, I learned Islam. And the funny thing is I was clearly knew it better than anyone else just because I read literally what Islam is and, didn't get it from somebody else telling me what it is. And I never turned into a Muslim sipping the juice. So I stayed objective to all of it. I just was blown away by the beauty of what Islam is, not what I'd learned if I went into a mosque. So here's what I'll tell you. Take everything your mom has told you. Even if your mom has been studying Islam for 30 years and he has degrees from the best university, I'm telling you now, take everything he taught you and throw it into a garbage can. And so anybody else that's coming into the mosque, they're not learning anything about Islam. All you're doing is blinding them, just like somebody that came into a church seeking God. You're not teaching them any sort of truth. You're just teaching them your truth. I mean no disrespect by that, but take a look around the world. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, Islam's in a very sad state. Everybody knows that. No one's got answers for it. Al-Qaeda and stuff made imams completely abandon jihad from the religion. Or they'll hide it behind their backs and say, out of pride that this is us, or because they're fear they'll get in trouble. And so Islam goes back to the time of, pre-Umar and Hamza's conversions, where you could only talk about Islam in the shadows. So to start, speaking facts, jihad is absolutely required in Islam and includes fighting. It states it plainly in the Quran text and also verses calling out the Muslims that don't really want to fight. So jihad played very prominently in the whole history of Islam. You could talk about Muhammad's time being split between spiritual teaching and his jihad. And there's no question that if Muhammad was here on this earth today, if you went into a mosque with Muhammad and his companions, they're going to teach you about jihad the first day and they're going to glorify it, right? There's really no arguing that. So when somebody's coming in and they don't talk about it, right, they're clearly not teaching Islam. It's really not hard logic to follow. So there's a prophecy about this happening in the latter days where no one understands Islam anymore. And imams probably teach it, not understanding that that's them. And it's not because the Quran gets lost. It's just because they stop trying to understand the religion and they just can repeat what someone taught them. Religion is totally blinding, whether it's a Muslim, a Christian, or any other religion. The parents teach it or somebody goes in there looking for God and the preacher teaches it. They really tap into someone's inner yearnings towards a creator, and then they just lay on all their truths to these people that these people accept for truths. So, you're going there, you're hearing this, and you're going into the church or the mosque, and you're seeing the people praying together, and they welcome you like family, and everything is so close, and they do charity for the local people and overseas, and you see the families coming together and all the festivals and holidays together in the community, and you're like, oh my God, this is the truth. This is the right religion, whether it's Christianity or whatever, Muslim, and so this is just blinding. Is essentially you're just getting blinded by the outer beauty of the religions, and beneath those there's a lot of emptiness, and all of them have holes you could like drive an 18-wheeler through, but the preacher will just be like, well, ignore those holes, love God, so if you put a follower of Muhammad and Jesus into the same room, right, they're going to land heavy blows against the other religion, and they're going to pimp their religion, and each of them are going to be able to attack the other one. For a Muslim, his truth is Muhammad and the Sunnah and the 5 pillars in the Quran. So someone's going to attack Muhammad and say, hey, he married a 6-year-old girl and he enjoyed cutting people's heads off. They will say the Quran's a forgery, and they're going to laugh when you say bring 10 chapters like it. So they'll say the God of Islam is inferior because he condones killing, and the Imam struggle to kind of give any good response. So if you don't question and seek to understand the worst parts of religion, then you have no religious knowledge. You're only parroting what somebody told you. You know, as an example why I couldn't be a Christian is, say I go in there and after 2 months I'm loving it. Oh, this is so beautiful. And then I find out the truth of the religion, which is, hey, someone could be the worst person in this life. He can assault little kids, but he goes to jail, and, you know, at some point he sincerely finds Jesus and he repents, and then he does good spreading the word of Jesus in jail for, 10 years before he dies, and he's going to heaven. And then you get a guy from China that, believes in God and doesn't sin and grows up without sin and has a good family and raises a good family, and even his kids, follow God and they fear God, but they don't believe in Jesus because 75% of the world doesn't. And so, this guy goes to hell and the other guy goes to heaven, right? So that doesn't make any sense to me. And so I couldn't continue with the religion until that made sense, which is never, right? I'm not a crazy person. I'm a Western guy. Always was a cool kid growing up, still have the cool guy vibe. I was always a brilliant student, but never really had any direction after some times of being lost. As my son grew up, I kind of got myself together, and now I'm managing medium-sized businesses, easy banker hours. I'm making $250,000. So nothing special, but at the same token, I'm not crazy. I'm not delusional. So again, I don't mean to disrespect anybody going into the mosque, the imams, the worshipers, but listen, I just want to invoke the God of Islam to offer a challenge and say to any imam out there that they are not a Muslim, they do not understand Islam, and they don't even understand the God of Islam. They're only a follower of Muhammad, and this is what they teach, and I can clearly point out with undebatable truths why this is why this is true and not just what I'm saying. So, when I first learned of this, I went into the mosque and I was like, oh, hey, this thing that you're teaching is not Islam, but, as soon as something was mentioned as jihad, the people would think I was an FBI agent, they'd walk away from me, and so I knew I wasn't welcome there. And so I stopped going. For many years I was kind of sad that, I was just weak in faith. And so I never became a Muslim, but I never let go of believing in God. So here's what I'm going to ask you to understand Islam. Don't be a religious zealot and just open your eyes. And it's best if you don't even think of Islam as a religion. Just think of it as, something that you can speak without getting lost in all these prayers and all the outside stuff you see at the mosque and the church is so great. So there's a saying in Islam that Allah's color is Islam, right? So I can paint you a beautiful picture of Islam in color. An imam and all the other people will stay completely blind to this painting until the last day, and I can tell you exactly why. There are 2 parts to Islam, and almost everyone can agree on this. There's Muhammad's 5 pillars and the stuff at the mosque, and there's the required jihad, right? So there's a saying that a true Muslim does not believe in peace without progress, nor progress without peace, but only both together. So you'll have an imam, and this will be the vast majority of them today, that fall under the peace without progress Muslims, right? And so these imams will take jihad completely out of the religion or teach the nonsense like the lesser jihad. So they paint a picture of Islam that's pure white. So everybody that wishes for a religion like this, that their church neighbors have, they're going to see it and be like, oh, this is beautiful. This is the real Islam, right? And so someone objective, though, is going to say, hey, wait a minute, what is this? What is this? Where's the jihad stuff? Like, it's missing from this, right? And so the imam will stumble, has no good answer. Then you'll have the rare imams that embrace the jihad part of Islam. So they're the progress without peace people, but they've let darkness get into their heart, right? Where killing innocent people seems fair seeming. So they paint a picture of Islam and it's in full black, right? And so anyone that's an extremist and, really prideful of religion is going to look at this picture in black and say, oh, this is the right religion, right? But the people that understand the peaceful part of it are going to be like, well, where do you get that you can kill innocent people, right? And so both of those imams, are only going to see Islam in white and black, and right? And so anybody else, they're only going to see it through those two lenses too. So it's an extremely simple mistake that they make. And so if you want to understand Islam, you need to understand that it involves both the prayer and jihad, but also what's the foundation of it? What's the more important part? What's the beautiful part of it? So they all make the same mistake and say the foundation of Islam is the 5 pillars, the Mohammad and his Sunnah, the Quran, all the beautiful outward ceremony and acts of devotion you see at the mosque. And jihad is the obligation that they're given, right? But if you view Islam like this, you'll be blind to it forever, right? There's only 2 paths an imam can follow from here, right? And we're just talking about common sense. I'm not talking to you as some religious leader or something. There's only 2 ways they can go with this. An imam that sees Islam in white and takes the 5 pillars as his foundation and the most important part of Islam, he's going to build a huge castle of playing cards in this life that's beautiful to him and all of his followers, right? And so this foundation that he has is the same foundation of all the other religion. It's like, my prophet is the best, my holy book is the best, my house of worship is the best, my God is the best, right? And those things are all so beautiful to him, but again, there's an emptiness to it. But these people, they don't understand it, so he goes ahead and he starts building a beautiful house of cards for his foundation, just like a Christian has. And as he gets towards the ends of his life, this imam is going to say, he's like, I didn't have time for jihad, but this castle I built is so beautiful. And so I know I'm going to be with the best of the Muslims when I get to the next life, right? And so when he gets to the next life, what Islam teaches is going to be like, think of it as like a little weight that gets put, the obligation of jihad. It's going to sit on that top of the house of cards. It's going to collapse the whole thing to the ground, right? You know what I mean? So it's going to be just a pile of rubble that's left. And then the imam's going to understand and be like, oh, now he's not going to be blind anymore. He's going to be like, my religion was the same as Christianity, right? It's not anything better. Look around the room, look around the world. That's what Islam is today. It's the same as Christianity, right? And so when either a imam that sees it in black, right, and he's, out there and kill the kuffar and stuff like this, he creates a foundation of the cards just like the person that sees Islam in white, right, and all the beautiful prayers and everything, and he goes off for jihad. But what happened is, as he's building this card foundation, pride gets into his heart about his religion, and he starts looking around the world and he gets anger and he gets revenge in his heart. And so his jihad ends up being something that's different than Allah's jihad, right? And so again, when he gets to the next life, the jihad that he was supposed to do, it's going to go on his foundation of cards is going to collapse. Those are the only 2 paths you can follow if you see Islam that way. So if you want to understand it, you need to reverse that. And you need to think that jihad is the foundation of Islam, which is comical, I know. But it's the beautiful part, the most important part of it, right? Prayers are the obligation, right? It's reversed. So Islam is clear that it's possible for one to be a Muslim without saying a single prayer, and it's equally clear that those who refuse to do jihad, they're never going to be a Muslim. This is the religion. This is how it teaches. Now, all sorts of attacks are going to come saying I'm introducing things to Islam and I'm not going, what the religion teaches. But no, they're not going by what the religion teaches. They've made up their own thing. And so, what sense does it make, right, that the foundation of Islam is Muhammad and his Sunnah and the 5 pillars and the Quran? How does that make sense if Muhammad said that his religion was the same as all the other religions? That he was a prophet just like any of the other prophets, and they're all here teaching the same thing. How can the foundation of that of someone going to the mosque be the same as Moses's or David's. Like, that it can't be. They had their foundation had to be something different. What made them a Muslim, right? What is the thing that made them a Muslim? What is it? What is Islam? What did they follow? And so Muhammad, there was a lot of time between the time Muhammad left the cave and when Islam was fully taught, and complete. So like, was Muhammad and his followers not a Muslim until that happened? Like, so this point of view absolutely makes no sense. And again, it's just a thing where, you're trying to just ignore the hole in your religion, out of faith. So if you want to not be a zealot, you have to understand something. Like, how does it all tie together? How is Muhammad, how does he tie to all the prophets going back to Adam? Like, where does everything connect, right? You have to take a string. If you're going to understand Islam literally as it teaches, you have to take a string and say, how do I bind this whole thing together, right? And so the only way you can do it, again, comically speaking, I'm not saying this, as a zealot, is jihad. And so what is jihad? So I'm going to just teach you the same thing that anyone else is going to teach you. It means the world's struggle. But what does that mean? So I'm just going to tell you what anybody else is going to tell you for historians. And that jihad is an infusion of a political movement that connects with a religious movement, and it pushes to get back against the rulers on the earth that they don't see as ruled by God's laws, right? And so historically speaking, Muhammad pushed this movement through in a variety of ways besides war. There were treaties, alliances, trade deals, all these other things. If jihad was just war to Muhammad, he would have been dead before he even reached Medina, right? If he was some kind of zealot and, cult leader and overthought his positioning, he would have got himself really killed quick if he's talking about jihad being war. One thing about him, whether you think he's a prophet or not, he was an incredibly strategic and skilled, grounded politician, and he never took the religion backwards, right? There's never one time in the story of Muhammad where he went backwards, except maybe the Battle of the Archers, but that's kind of debatable. And also, that wasn't really a miscalculation on his part, and it wasn't a heavy blow to Islam. So I'm not telling you anything new there. But first, let me explain to you something really important. Jihad in the Quran is different than Al-Qaeda and ISIS jihad. The verses calling for jihad in the Quran are well known, and kill them where you find them, and all these different things. And the critics of Islam are going to latch on to this, right? And the terrorists are going to latch on to verses talking about, propaganda with those who want clinging to the earth, right? So even though those verses exist, there's also decisive verses in the Quran that balance out jihad to make you understand it and to make it about justice and not extremist vengeance, right? And so while the white Muslims, ignore the verses, the black Muslims also ignore verses like this that give balance to jihad. So the clearest verse from this that I can tell you is 5:8 in the Quran, right? And it's translated and paraphrased as, "O you who believe, be upright for Allah, bear as a witness in justice, and let not hatred of a people incite you to not act equitably. Be just, Allah is aware of what you do." And that is such a decisive verse. And it's basically stating, there's no anger, there's no hatred, and there's no darkness in Islamic jihad, right? That's what that verse says. It's only about seeking true justice. If you think I'm whitewashing it, Muhammad didn't kill any innocent people. And when you hear Al-Qaeda and ISIS say death to America and death to the West, right? There's another verse in the Quran that's very clear on this. It says, not for you. It starts with not for you to decide, right? And so Allah is basically telling Muhammad, like, you don't get to wish doom on your enemy. So anybody that's talking like that, that's a clear 101 Islam violation. Like, they have these imams that make up these fatwas or whatever, and it's against Islam 101, right? So I'll make you a parable and pretend like there's a man, he's a very close family, someone kills his brother, and his family's devastated. His mom can't eat, she can't get up, blah, blah, blah. right? And so in this situation, this man, if he leaves his home and he has anger, revenge, and darkness in his heart, he's going to go out there. Maybe he finds the person that kills his brother and he kills him, right? But if he was driven by rage, maybe he killed the wrong person. Maybe his brother's death was an honest accident. Maybe his brother instigated the whole thing. Maybe he couldn't find the person that killed his brother, but found the brother of that person and killed him and said it's an eye for an eye, right? And so that man may think Allah has helped him avenge his brother, but he's done a terrible thing, right? That's not Allah's jihad, right? A Muslim is only to fight for true justice, and he can't wish doom on his enemy. Rather, he's asked Allah to let the people see the truth, right? You can't see the truth if you're killing innocent people. ISIS jihad is not in the Quran. Anyone that has sense can see the terrorist attack pushes Islam backwards, right? They're essentially zealots, asking Allah to send down lightning bolts to strike down their enemy. And again, Muhammad, this was not his jihad. He was always very sound-minded and pushing ahead Islam however he could, and just asking for God's help to let the people see the truth. If there's any doubt still about how Muhammad would feel about extremists today, there's actually clear proof on this, right? And so one of Islam's biggest victories was a treaty with their mortal enemy, right? The people from Mecca. And so Muhammad, rather than fighting in this case, saw great wisdom in the treaty, and that it would allow the people to see what Islam is really about. And it allowed the Muslims to progress in a lot of ways that they could only do during a time of peace and not war, right? But in this situation, Omar, the second caliph, he was livid about the treaty, right? And he could not understand, if the Muslims are supposed to be the people of God, why are they, making a treaty with the disbelievers? He had made no sense to them. He was driven by anger, revenge. He's cut these kuffars' heads off, right? And so Omar eventually realized, this wasn't Islam in his heart at the time, right? And he didn't understand jihad like Muhammad taught jihad, right? His jihad was something dark, right? And so you can see plainly how Muhammad would deal with these people today from that story. Interestingly, a few weeks after I had my dream about Islam, I had studied it, and I concluded, Islam was gone for the earth because everybody can only see it in white or black, right? And then just at that time, a few weeks later, bin Laden had he talked about offering peace, right? And that was actually the very thing that inspired me to go to a mosque, because I was like, wow, that's a flicker of maybe there's hope somewhere, right? And he got rejected, I was rejected, so that didn't go anywhere. And I'm not doing any talking, to glorify him or anything. I just thought that was kind of a funny story. But anyways, so I'm going to explain to you why jihad is always going to be the foundation of Islam, and why you can't be a Muslim without it, right? I'm never going to be a Muslim going off for jihad, but just to make you understand it and give you a real world example, right? Because most of the time when people are talking about jihad in the past of Muhammad, it's about, it's not about why it makes sense today. It's more, was Muhammad a good person or bad person? Is Islam good or bad, right? But there's no one to be like, why does it still matter today, right? The standard thinking is that's gone. That's a thing of the past. It's not part of the religion anymore. So I'm going to explain to you why it is, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create for you a fictional character to help you understand it, right? So I'm going to create a fictional character called James. We'll call him Imam James, right? And so James learns Islam the way I do, right? And so he understands the gravity of it and thinks tomorrow he's going to maybe he gets hit by a bus. He's going to be in front of God. His place in all of eternity is going to be based on his time on earth, and so he starts thinking, and he's like, what can I do to be one of the people that are, favorites in God's eyes, right? He wants the best place in the next life, right? So James decides pretty much the most selfless thing you can do. And he decides, I'm going to go off to some place like the Congo and, do good things for those people. 80% of them are living in extreme poverty. They're born with no hope. In the Western world, we can't even imagine what these people go through, right? And so anybody can understand, that's the most selfless thing someone can do, whether it's Doctors Without Borders or aid workers, going to help these people. In these places like sub-Saharan Africa, they get oppressed worse in biblical times, right? So James has a nest egg built up, Imam James, and he goes to the Congo along with his family. He finds a nice safe place to open a mosque, right? And he gets in there and he starts teaching the 5 pillars and all the same stuff you'll find in a mosque today, right? He's able to do some great charity work, and he coordinates with a lot of groups and stuff for that, and he does some amazing work with it and like things that you're like, wow. But at the end of 4 years, James has built, this good following. People know him on Instagram. He's doing really well. He has the respect of not only the Muslims, but the people in other religions and just in general being like, wow, this guy's a great guy. He's also safe from the corrupt leaders because it's, all of them want to kind of have a fake image, like they support James and God. So all is good with James. Every one of the people in the mosque today would be like, what a great guy this is, right? But James understands Islam, and he understands the difference between a Muslim and a follower of Muhammad, right? Because James understands he can spend the next 30 years doing this, building a foundation of cards that goes to the sky with all these great deeds and millions of people following him on Instagram talking about what great he is and all this good stuff. But he knows that in 30 years, when he's done with all of it, the life will not be any better for the people of the Congo, for the masses, right? So he did all these things and it's, this is so beautiful, but he knows full well the emptiness of it, that in 30 years, life is not going to be better for them. Look at what it was in the past. Think about it. Like, it's not going to change for the people, right? And so James understands that. He understands when he gets in front of God, God isn't going to be fooled with what the people were fooled with in this life, right? And so, he does, what Islam does. And he says, he starts to infuse political movement into his preaching, right? And so he starts pointing out to the followers, listen, God has forbidden the rulers of men from doing this to the masses. This corruption, this injustice, this is like something so bad, it's just like the biblical times, And speaking plainly, when word gets out that James has started to talk like this, that saying, like questioning the leaders and everything, be reasonable. What's going to happen is the people ruling Congo are going to want to kill James, right? That's not even a question. That not only are they going to want to kill James, they'll probably rape his wife and daughter too and kill them, At the very best in a lot of countries, James is going to go to prison where he's going to sit until he's gray, right? That's just the reality of it. There's no, that's what it is. Right. And because he's become a direct threat to the rulers, not only the rulers, but all the warlords that, profit off chaos. And, there's people going around raping and killing. And like James is becoming a danger to them, right? To the company's treasury, to the rule of the land, he's a danger. So someone that likes James, though, that hears about this from the rulers, they're going to come in and he's going to say, James, like, I'm a well-wisher of you, but you need to stop talking about this religious stuff, right? Your followers, they're not strong. No foreign aid's going to help you in politics here. Listen, if you don't stop talking like this, you're going to be dead in a few weeks. Like, that's what's going to happen. So stop what you're doing now. Stop talking about this if you know it's good for you, right? But this situation is literally the thing that James knew was coming, and there's no surprise to him. This is jihad, right? This is the only way to describe jihad because it's the best way you can talk about a struggle. There's no more beautiful thing in the world for mankind than this struggle that he would make, right? Because what the struggle is he's putting the welfare of the masses, the weakest people on earth that are being oppressed, all these bad things that are happening, and he's putting their welfare ahead of his own life, the life of his family, his whole livelihood, all of his time on this earth, right? He's pushing it ahead for something bigger than himself, right? He is concerned about the masses when nobody else is, and he's willing to push his life. Everything he does from this point is going to be a struggle because he's risking his life. You understand? And so like jihad, if you can just understand it plainly, not as a Muslim, like that's what jihad is. There's no more beautiful struggle. So any freaking imam that's like, oh, know the lesser jihad and can't explain it, what a disgrace he is, right? Because it's easy to understand, like, why it's the most beautiful thing in the world, right? And there's only one way to understand jihad. So that's, clearly what it is. So Karen from the United States is going to come and say, what sort of religion is this? And what sort of people are these Muslims lovers jihad? What backwards people they are, right? And so ask Karen who her country's greatest heroes are. Who are the best souls in the world to them? Is it not their military? It's not their priests that half the people think sexually liked boys, It's their military, right? Because their military are ones that are willing to risk their lives, their livelihood, all the time on this earth for something bigger than themselves, right? But when someone's in a military, they're fighting for their way of life and interests, which, the other 150 plus countries on earth, they're fighting for the same thing. And they might object to, what the other militaries think is the right way, right? So if you have any common sense, it's easy to understand something better than even this, the military who are every country's most beautiful souls that they have, something more beautiful than this is James's struggle for people that are brutally oppressed, right? They have no protector. And so James is seeking to protect these people. They might be a different color. They might speak a different language than James. They might be another religion, right? But James is standing up for them, simply because it's the center of the moral compass, right? To stand up for the weakest people on earth that have been left behind no matter what, and be willing to risk your life for them, right? That's the center of mankind's moral compass, right? James isn't doing it. His jihad isn't some obligation to Muhammad or some cult religion. He's not out there for the 48 virgins. You understand? He's not doing it because some radical imam told him so. He's not doing it because he read it in some book, He's doing it because he wants to be the best person in God's eyes. You know what I mean? That's what his jihad's for. It's not for anything else. So Jihad tells the warner, he's like, listen, this is the very situation that I knew was coming. It's the very same thing that I knew all the prophets would face. And it's not for me to abandon this path that God has put me on. You and I both know that these people suffering will continue to suffer for hundreds of years if I don't stand up for them. So I'm not going to stop speaking his truth and, tell the rulers whatever they're going to do, plot against me, combine, give me no respite. And I'm just going to ask my God to either protect me or give me the best place in the next life, right? And so when you understand this, you can see that this is the top of the spiritual ladder, man. I'm not talking about religious stuff. I'm talking about just like, this is the top of the spiritual ladder for any mankind. You know what I mean? It's the epitome of selflessness, right? If we're going to make jokes about Western culture, it's like a Jedi Knight or something, right? Being a protector of the weakest on earth and ready to, stand up for them for oppression, right? It's not out of some sort of zealotry or anything. It's just finding the center of, the moral compass, right? And so this is what makes a Muslim superior to any other believer, right? Because they don't have this. They can't say this. They're not only any other religion. There's no one else that is this good in life, this selfless. So this is what makes James a Muslim, right? There is no being a Muslim without jihad. And so if you think Muhammad's the father of jihad and that it's first introduced in the Quran, you don't get it, right? And so the number one thing you could say about the Quran to summarize it is it's a book that it talks about, it's trying to point out the stories of the other prophets and tying Muhammad to them, right? And so Muhammad, Father Muhammad is just going to be a juice sipper, and they just read past all those stories and they love it, but they don't understand it. They don't recognize that the jihad of Muhammad, that's the same jihad of Moses, right? Muhammad's jihad isn't any different, right? And so a similar warner came to Moses and said, go to safety, like they're plotting against you. Like, do you not see in the story of Moses, like jihad, when he's going in front of the Pharaoh, if we're to believe the biblical stories, right? And he's going in front of this big, powerful Pharaoh that can just kill him or he can imprison him. And so before Moses even has a chance to migrate, like he is at a place where he could just be killed for talking about the stuff that he believes in, or thrown into prison, right? And Muhammad's jihad is he keeps pushing it forward. Even though somebody else would think he's really freaking stupid, right? He's pushing it forward, right? So a Muslim that can understand this and the Quran, they can read the Bible, and so they just see jihad there too. So when Karen mocks James and says, jihad, James says, Karen, open up your Bible. You're flying jihad all over the place, right? And so this is plain for anyone with sense, right? And so if you want to understand what a follower of Muhammad is, which I'm saying the Imam is in the mosque today, I'm going to introduce another Imam, going to call him Imam Pete, right? Imam Pete was in the same position James was when a Warner came to him, right? But Imam Pete took the Warner's sound advice, and he went back to the mosque, and he told his people, listen, we need to take this politics stuff out of our religion. Let's go back to what we were teaching with the 5 pillars and all the great charity work we're doing, right? He reasons if we're able to spend the next 30 years on this earth, we're going to be able to guide more people. We're going to be able to do the great charity that we're doing. There's a lot of good we can do by still being on this earth, right? And so Imam Pete is going to build that castle of cards that touches the sky, right? And so all the followers in him are going to believe in it. The most important thing in this life to Pete is his time on earth, right? Imam Pete. He wants 1,000 years on the earth, just like a Jew, because he thinks it's going to allow him to keep doing good deeds that he does. And he's going to blind himself to all the suffering in the world and thinks this isn't his greater responsibility, right? And so it's the same with the followers, right? They're all going to come for their prayers, and they're going to go to the mosque for Eid, and they're going to be there at the community events, and they're going to give in charity. But when you ask them about the weakest people on earth, they're going to be like, there's not much we can do about that, but we're just going to keep coming here and doing the good that we do, right? So if these people are Muslims, and Imam Pete is a Muslim, then what is James? What is Imam James in his jihad, right? And so, if these believers, if Imam Pete is a Muslim, then James needs a new religion that's better than Islam, right? He needs to be called something better than a Muslim because he's better than that, right? They both can't be Muslims, right? So that's where you're at. So then, so the bottom line is Imam James, he's a Muslim. And Imam Pete is what you see in the mosque today. And he's a follower of Muhammad. And so he's given the same sermons like a priest does and making it seem like his religion's so beautiful, but it's completely empty underneath, right? And so that's what all the religions are on the earth today. You look around, they're for people's own purpose, right? That you go in, you fear God, you be a good person on this earth, thinking you're going to be accountable, have a good heart for the weak, and throw some charity into the pot when you can, right? And beneath that, there's an emptiness. But, God acknowledges in Islam, hey, there's good deeds in all this stuff at the church and the mosque, but behind that is emptiness. So if you're sipping the mosque, if you're in the mosque praying right now and you're sipping the juice, just think for a second how close your religion is to the other ones. You're thinking you're going to go meet God in the next life with a book in your right hand, right? Ready for your great reward. You're going to say, I was a follower of Muhammad, lover of the Quran. I prayed at the mosque. Please give me my VIP section of heaven that's waiting for me, right? Do you understand how close this is to the other religions? It's the same entitlement that a Jew or a Christian has, that they just need to go to the next life, drop the right name of the prophet, the right religious name, and then they get the keys for the best places, right? And so all these religions, they're grasping onto the bottom rung of the spiritual ladder to get them into heaven, right? Their religion at the end of the day is for themselves. Even when they're giving it to charity, it's for their own souls. They're grabbing on and just doing what they can to get into heaven, right? Essentially, a Muslim is not allowed to grasp onto that bottom rung, right? Not if they want to call themselves a Muslim. They have to climb to the very top of that ladder to be ahead of the people in the other religions, right? So their religion is about being something something bigger than themselves. It's not religious dogma. It's the most beautiful path a religion can take, right? While the other religions abandon that to give themselves an easier path. Right? So that's what Muslim is. That's what jihad is. So what is Islam? So, what is Islam that guided all the prophets? They were all supposedly guided by the same thing from Adam to Muhammad. So what is it? So To make you understand, we're going to go back to the story of Imam James, but we're going to parallel it to Muhammad's life, and we're going to pretend that push up the timeline to when Muhammad conquered Mecca, and we're going to say James went through all those things and he took control of the Congo, right? Now, in 2025 life, James is going to stop there. He's going to start stuffing his pockets and pockets around him. He's going to forget the beautiful mission he's on. But for the sake of this story, James is a Muslim, right? And so he's going to look at it when he conquers Congo, and he's going to look at his people and say, we're not done here. The people of the Central African Republic, they've been long oppressed just like our people have, right? And he's going to say, it's our duty to free them too, right? And so here comes Karen and the critics again, and say, what sort of religion is this? What sort of fighting is this in this God? These Muslims, they've been commanded to spread their religion by the sword, And so moms today, they have no answer for it. They kind of race with each other to abandon jihad and stuff. God must have made a mistake. It's like Christianity 10 years from now, where all the gay people and the transvestites, they're going to be like welcome with open arms because God made a mistake, So there's no mistake in Islam. So James, he has all the easy answers for Karen. And he's like, listen, Karen, now that I'm leader of the Congo, it'd be easier and better for me to take this jihad stuff out of my religion, right? I can build some palaces, buy some yachts. I can still be good to the people. We can still do a lot of charity work. He's like, listen, I can go to the mosque on Friday, like you go to the church on Sunday. I can still do good things. And he's like, listen, so I like it. I'm ready to go to my God, and I'm going to tell him that jihad should be done now. And I'll explain maybe there's some kind of mistake, but now it doesn't make sense anymore. Right? And so that's what he's going to say. And so he's going to say, listen, Karen, I only ask one thing of you. If I should give up this jihad of mine to free the people of the Central African Republic, from which we both agree they're like brutally oppressed, corruption we can't imagine, all this stuff. Like, if I ask God to take this out of my religion, you just need to tell me who is going to take my place, right? Who on earth is going to take my place? Because if you can't tell me that, then I can't go to my God and ask him to let me out of this, right? And so is there any country that's going to help him? The U.S., the UK, China, Germany? Because it really seems like all those countries, they're fine with brutal dictatorships if it serves their best interests, right? And so no country's ever going to help them, right? Is the UN going to do anything? We all know what a joke the UN is, right? And so are the people from the other religions and the charities and the aid groups, are they going to help the masses with oppression? Or are they just going to go out there and with all the charity money, they're going to gobble up 95% of it? And then they're going to put 5% of it to use to the cause and make it look like they're over there doing God's work, right? So Karen has no answer for James. So the people in the sub-Saharan Africa that have suffered for 100 years, they're going to continue to suffer for 100 years. That's because mankind can never find the way to the center of humanity on its own. The idea that no man on this earth is left behind, no matter what color, language, religion, right? And so an atheist is going to tell you that man doesn't need God to find their way to the center of the moral compass, right? In theory, that's correct, but consider the world today, the direction it's going, and the thousands of years of history that we know. Mankind will never find their way there on their own. It's just not in human nature. Human nature is far too tribal, right? To care first about your own life and your immediate family, maybe your extended family, then the community, then maybe a state, at the very most a country, but most people don't even make it to a country, right? And so if you're honest with yourself about Western culture, ask yourself, like, if someone from Western culture reads a story about a civil war that's killed 1 million people in some third world country, or if they read a story about 100 wild gorillas being senselessly slaughtered, which of the two stories would be more upsetting to this person, right? If you don't think it's the gorillas, you're lying to yourself, right? So there's been a complete disconnection in our humanity, bridging us all together, right? There's nothing in this world that binds us together with those, black people with no shoes in sub-Saharan Africa that makes it our responsibility to protect those people, right? There's nothing in the world like that. There's no country, organization. There's nothing. So I'm telling you this not as a Muslim. I'm just like, this is the plain truth. There's nothing. There's nothing that ties us to them. nothing that binds everybody together, right? Except Islam. Islam is the only thing on earth, objectively speaking, that does this, that ties people together like this, that ties humanity together. This is Islam, man. This is the religion of Muhammad, of Adam, of Moses. Like, this is what is Islam to them. This is what is in their breast. This is when they go off, this is in Muhammad's breast when he leaves the cave. It's in all of their missions. This is the thing that guides them. This is Islam. You understand? There's nothing better, objectively speaking, in this world than that. It's the center of all humanity stuff. You know what I mean? And so, when you start talking about Islam and you reduce it to these prayers in the mosque and all this kind of crap that the Christians do, you just take away all the beauty from it, man. It's like Islam just doesn't mean the same thing it does anymore, right? And so James is going to mock his God and say, in his holy book, and say, what kind of terrible God do you have that talks about fighting? What sort of God is this, And, your Imam, they can't even defend your God, and they stumble over themselves. But again, James is really, he's got an easy answer for Karen. He says, Karen, listen, if you want to understand which of our gods is better, I'm going to tell you to go do something. Go find a mirror, pretend you're talking with your God, and tell him, you want to be the best person on this earth in his eyes. And say, God, can you give me two choices? And tell me which one is dear to you. And so, God, I can either offer you that I will never miss a prayer, and I will be at your house of worship, and I will do all the good things that happen there, and I will praise your name there. I'll do in charity. I will never, let you down in my religious duties, and I'll love you. Okay, I can do this, or I can go off and I can help the weakest people on earth, even if it means risking my life for them. But if I do this, God, and I go off to help those people, I'm not going to find any time for prayer. I'm not going to be able to go do any prayers. I'm not going to be able to praise your name to people. I can't do any combination of these two things. You need to pick for me which one is more important to me, which one is more dear to you. You can't pick a combination. It's one or the other, God. So God A is going to say, well, I understand the weakest on earth, it's become almost an impossible thing in this life. And, we just need to do the best we can and have a heart for them and give in charity we can. But, the most important thing you do is, continue to go to the church and the mosque, love me, pray to me, make your prayers, do the best that we can. And that's all you can do, right? God B is going to answer and say, if you don't have your time for prayers and to praise me, well, so be it. But, if you go off and you help the weakest people on earth, that's how you're going to be the most favorite. That's how you're going to be my favorite on this earth, right? And so be honest with yourself. If you were to become God tomorrow and a follower asked you this question, would you be so vain as to be God A? Do you not understand, something would seriously be wrong with a God if there's a God and he's God A? That is not a good God, right? And so if you have any common sense, you would say the better person is God B, someone that has a better heart. And if you consider yourself a good person, you are going to be God B. And you're going to say, forget about your prayers to me. Forget about, glorifying me and all this stuff. Help the people that need it most, right? That's just basic reasoning. No zealotry in that. That's simple. So God A is the God on this earth of all the other religions, of the follower of Muhammad, of Jesus. They all want, their God is God A. God B is the God of Islam that nobody wants, right? And so the followers of Muhammad, they changed to God A for the same reasons the followers of Moses did, right? No one wants God B in his jihad, right? This is it's the objectively far more beautiful path, like we've said, but it's also the far harder path. And no one wants this for a religion, right? And so they want their religion, they change it all to be like, hey, following our prophet is so important, and all the prayers that we do. And God loves that the most, more than everything. And he loves to hear his name praised. and then that's what they want their religion to be. So this way they can have an easy path in this world, right? And then they get to the next world and they're entitled because it's, oh, I'm a Muslim or I'm a Christian. Where's the keys to my mansion? And so this is why, their followers of Muhammad changed their religion from Islam. Like, no one wants the religion of Islam anymore. It's the most beautiful, but it's just way too hard, And so essentially what happens is the imams and priests are going to just blind their followers with the beauty that they have. You're just going to get an endless cycle of indoctrination, right? And so your imam will share about prayers being more important than God, than jihad and this stuff, but they're not, understanding the hadiths and reconciling them with the Quran to understand that, your prayers, they're not going to mean anything more to God than a Christian's prayers if you're abandoning jihad from your religion, right? And so I can tell you and give you some clear reasons in my next video about why you can't be a Muslim and the proof that says in the Quran without jihad, because there's qualities in it for the people to go out for jihad that none of the other religions have. So in my next video, I'm going to teach you about that.